It's Wednesday afternoon. It must be Talking Drupal time. This is episode 77, December 10th, 2014. And today we are talking about staying current. You can watch the show get recorded live on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. You could also go to talkingdrupal.com/live and record somewhere around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And it will show up again later in YouTube and in your iTunes feed. Welcome, everybody, to episode 77.
Hey there.
Good afternoon.
How was everybody today?
Good.
Great.
Wonderful.
We got to hang out last night for a little bit.
Yeah, it was nice.
Providence Drupal Meetup meeting. Drupal Meetup meeting? And we got to talk some Drupal stuff for an hour or so. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was good. I think the new format worked out, and we had really good attendance again last night too. So it feels like maybe the meetup's rebounding a little bit.
Yeah, that'd be nice to see. So the format change we made was moving to just lightning talks, which is anyone and everyone can get up and talk for a little bit. And we probably had 5 people speak about different things they're working on and some techniques and things like that. It was great.
Yeah, and we got some time to spend some time beating up on John and John, which was fun.
Yeah. So, welcome, Jason Palmental from HW Design.
Hey there.
Other than Drupal PVD, what else is shaking?
I don't know. I've been writing a couple articles lately that have been really pretty interesting. So hopefully some of those things will get published soon, and I can actually talk about them. So that'll be good. But that kind of ties in nicely with what we're talking about today.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good topic for today.
Yeah.
Joining us also is John Picozzi from Oomph.
Good afternoon.
John, you look like you're laying on your couch or something. What's going on?
He's laying on his couch.
I am. Didn't make the migration upstairs to my office for today's show, so
Okay.
I am in my armchair.
He also forgot to lean into the razor when he shaved this morning too.
No, I've been avoiding my razor for at least the last month.
Don't have much to show for that.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm hoping another month, maybe by January, we'll have something.
You'll hit puberty one of these days, John. It'll fill in.
Yeah, maybe.
And joining us from mid-Massachusetts, we have Nick Laughlin from Enlightened Design.
Afternoon. Hoping the snow stays away tomorrow. Got a 60% chance, and that would be just terrible. Miss our flights, or at least be delayed. So hopefully the snow stays away long enough for us to take off, because where we're going, we won't have to worry about it.
What time is your flight?
3:40 p.m.
PM? Oh no, you're hosed.
Is this supposed to be? Is this supposed to be snow?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
About a 60% chance of snow. It's not supposed to be too heavy though, so they might be able to take off anyway.
Taking off is not ever the issue in snow. It's always the plane that you're supposed to take off on. Has it arrived?
Yeah.
That's what the issue is.
I'm sure it'll be okay. You guys will get off to a good start, and you've got a nice long trip. So.
No fear here, but the homepage for weather.com says 15 inches of snow reported.
For us?
Well, it's
Wow.
coming or has come. I don't know.
I can never tell with weather.com. Oh yeah, read the full story. Well, we'll see.
You guys know that weather.com is a Drupal website?
Yeah, that was a relatively recent migration.
Yeah.
And that was MediaCurrent that did it.
Right.
The folks down in Atlanta, I think.
They say that it is the article I read last week said it is the Drupal with the heaviest traffic that exists. Something like 1 billion visits a month or something.
Wow.
I think 100 million.
100 million a month?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, 1 billion visits a year. That's
$1 billion a year.
What would be interesting is to see if they're actually using Drupal to power their mobile app as well. Like if all of this information is coming out of the same database.
You know, that's always been one of the things that seemed really odd is that oftentimes you look at a format, a forecast on the website and the app, and it would just be, and in email, and it would just be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know one of the main reasons for going to Drupal is to simplify the editorial process. I don't know how much of Drupal is the front end. I think it's more just getting the information into their system, and then I think they serve it through something like Angular. The really popular headless Drupal. I'm not entirely positive about that, but I'm pretty sure that's how it's being handled. And Drupal is just really simplifying, pulling everything together.
Well, but they've got some really super talented people there, and maybe we ought to reach out and see if we could get Kendall Totten or one of the people to join us. It'd be pretty cool to hear about some of the inside scoop on how that project went.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's always interesting to look at some of these projects after they're built and learn a little about them.
Yeah. Well, we had that great presentation from Matt Westgate a couple of years ago at our local meetup about building the Grammy website, and it was fascinating to see what kind of load it was handling and how they ended up building it. And I mean, the stuff that Matt talked about has influenced how I build Drupal sites ever since.
Mm. It's sort of a good lead into our topic today of how do you know that weather.com was recently rebuilt with Drupal? I learned that because I have a Google alert set up that searches for the word Drupal, and every day I get an email that curates blogs and news articles and all kinds of stuff, and it sits in my email box every morning, and I go through it, which is where a lot of the source comes from on the Talking Drupal Twitter feed that I probably put out 10 to 15 articles a week on that feed. And they're generally coming from the few places that I curate my information from.
Yeah, that's a great way to keep up on things, and I know that Ellen will often create Google feeds for clients and topics regularly, and use that to keep up to date with things on Drupal or things relating to a project we're working on, and it's a really nice way to create sort of a customized feed of information to follow up with every day.
It's always nice to be able to send a customer a little note saying, hey, I saw the article you were mentioned in somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's a great customer relation thing. So I do sort of the same kind of thing as I have probably 15 different Google alerts that I get every day. So if anyone's not familiar with Google Alerts, you should check it out, alerts.google.com. Great service.
And in case anybody's wondering, Steve actually is the busiest person I have ever met. I have no idea how you keep up with all the things that you do every day.
I use things like Google Alerts.
Yeah, but receiving it's one thing, acting on it's another.
Right. Yeah, I'm beginning to wonder how I'm doing it myself. Maybe I'm not doing it all very well.
Well, I think it does. Well, you set aside chunks of time. We're taking a little break right now, but we've done our web design book club where we set aside an hour to talk about stuff every week, and instead started up doing the Exploring Drupal 8. I think a lot of it just really has to do with making it a habit.
Yeah, time management, is blocking off that time, which I've gotten pretty good at doing because I've had to.
Yeah. Well,
so that's one great way of starting, and that's the topic today, is staying current, is what do we do and what can you do to know what's going on in the Drupal world and the tech world. And it could be anything from, learning that weather.com is built in Drupal. That's a great piece of information to know if you're out there talking to people about Drupal. And maybe what are the latest technology trends in terms of web design and things like that. I think these are two kind of key areas that I focus on in my looking for information. So what other ways do you guys pull or how do you get your latest news? Let's first focus on Drupal, and then we'll step out of Drupal and look at other technology things.
I start off every week with Lullabot's newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
That comes in, I think it's every Monday morning, and there's always something interesting in there. I find out module of the week. I read about that. Read about latest releases on Drupalize Me. There's always something in there that I'll end up wanting to follow up on.
We'll stick these links, as we usually do, in the show notes for people looking to get to them later. So if we could, between the four of us, try to build out that resource section in this document as we go through, it would be helpful for everyone. Yeah, so Acquia also has a blog. They have a number of blogs, I think, but they have a few blogs that are posted to on a real regular basis, a couple of times a week, that often promote some of their products and stuff, but it's also industry-related type items. So that's a great place to. There's tons of blogs. So the other thing that I do, other than the Google alerts, is I use an RSS reader. I know. Does anyone use those anymore? Does anyone use an RSS reader?
I don't.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
It's not a long time.
Oh man.
I never got into it.
Yeah, so I have one that I use called Feedly. It's kind of like the one that surfaced when the Google Reader disappeared. It might be a year ago now. And in there, I have a section for Drupal, and I have, looks like 11 blogs and websites that I pull content from. So between Google Alerts and this, I kind of get almost everything. And I've got the Lullabot. I've got the Lullabot newsletter in there. I've got a couple of things from Acquia blog in there. I've got Drupal Planet, which is another source. Is it a Drupal Planet? Is that a Drupal.org site?
I don't recall.
Yeah, it's from Drupal.org.
Yeah.
So Drupal Planet, they have a number of articles and they kind of curate things. So there's a number of websites that curate content from other places. One of them is Drupal Planet. Is anyone familiar with any others? We got, let's see, I'm looking through my notes here. The Weekly Drop is another one. I think it's theweeklydrop.com. That is another curated website where they're pulling articles from all over the internet related to Drupal and putting them in one place for you. And that's handy to have because you can subscribe and it sends you a weekly email. I happen to pull that content from an RSS feed. So in my RSS reader under Drupal, I have that 10 or 11 blogs or curated websites that pulls content in, and I just sort of quickly scan through that. Often there's duplicates between that and what's in my Google Reader, but it's really a great way to pull things.
So, Steve, do you do that instead of getting the Weekly Drop newsletter or in addition to?
I don't subscribe to the newsletter. I pull the RSS feed, which is the same content.
Okay,
just because it comes into one place.
I'm actually doing kind of the opposite. I'm getting a newsletter. I get the Lullabot, or I used to get the Lullabot newsletter. They kind of changed the format of it a little bit, I feel. But they're also doing something new for more front-end developers. So I get that, and I also get the Weekly Drop newsletter. But something I like to do, because I don't really have a ton of time to read a bunch of different articles, I actually listen to a lot of podcasts. I get about an hour commute, half-hour commute to the office if there's no traffic. And there's nothing better than in the car listening to a podcast. And there are some great Drupal podcasts out there, like the Drupalize Me podcast. That's probably one of the biggest ones that I listen to in the Drupal sphere. All the rest of them are kind of general tech and web development sorts of podcasts.
And one more kind of curated location for content is the Drupal subreddit. It's both a moderator curated and community curated content, so people can sometimes post questions, or they'll post neat modules that they've recently found. But one thing that makes it particularly helpful is the main moderator, Curators, posts daily and weekly weekly threads. So every single Wednesday is Drupal Contrib Wednesday. It's a place to talk about a module that you recently found and how you used it and why you like it. Every Tuesday is Triumphant Tuesday, so you can post about a website that you just released and why it's really cool. So it's a great way to see what people are doing in the industry, and it's a great way to get an idea of what the public is thinking about. It's a great place for finding information about security updates and that as well.
Cool.
This was Reddit. Is that what you said, Nick?
Yeah.
I got lost for a minute. Okay. So I have read it. I don't know why I don't keep looking at it more regularly. Because I have my group of things that I look at every day, and I don't know why that one is not in the.
Since you're that busy, it's probably a good thing to stay away from Reddit. It's
Yeah, you know what? I think
huge time sinks.
Well, you know what, Nick? I think part of it is it's a forum more than anything, right?
It's a link aggregator site, but you can comment on the links.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think I find that there's a lot less quality of stuff per time that I spend in it than in some of these other places. This is probably why I don't go there very often.
A lot of animated cat gifs is what you're saying.
Yeah, they're probably all posted by Jeff Eaton.
Yeah, he's actually fairly active on the site.
Right.
And you have to go elsewhere on the site for the cat gifs, though. But
Oh, okay.
sometimes they bleed into there. I hear David Reed is pretty good at posting your reaction gifs. So if he's in a thread with you, you might see something.
Nice.
Interesting. We'll have to have a podcast or a show on the pronunciation of GIF or GIF.
We don't have to do it. The creator came out and spoke about the pronunciation.
Yeah, the show's over. It's GIF.
It's GIF.
I'll never remember to say it that way, but it's GIF.
Yeah, I never say it that way.
Really? I've
I've been calling it a GIF for 20 years. It's hard to break that habit.
Exactly.
I would say that the creator is probably suffering from old age. Just a thought.
Any other Drupal-related podcasts anyone listens to?
Well,
Talking
it's Drupal Easy.
Right.
Oh, nobody listens to Talking Drupal, Nick. It's just four idiots yammering away for an hour every week. I mean, who would bother?
Do you know what? And there's another one here that I listen to often, and it's slipping my Code Karate. Is that the one?
There's one that you sent over recently.
No, I don't think that's
Hooked
it.
on Drupal?
No, that's. Oh no, I saw that. That's a brand new one. So
Yeah.
Hooked on Drupal it's in like episode 3 or 4.
Yeah.
I think it's a video podcast. I'm not sure if it's audio.
Hook Podcast Alter?
Right. Is that what it is?
No, I just made it up. I'm sure somebody else has
Great
made the
name
joke
though,
already.
right? Checking my feeds here. Wow, it's not in my feed. Oh, you know, I cleared my feed. I listen to a lot of podcasts too as well, and about every 6 months I delete every single podcast that I subscribe to, and then I make myself go back and resubscribe to stuff because I end up listening to too many and falling behind. So it's a great way of figuring out which ones you really care about.
Right.
Is by deleting them all and starting again. So I don't have any other Drupal ones in my subscribe list right now.
Yeah, I don't really listen to. Well, it goes through cycles. I don't listen to podcasts much in the summer because I don't have a commute. So the only time I would have to really listen to them is when I go to the gym. And
Not biking?
no,
It's dangerous, I guess.
Yeah, I mean it's dangerous and it's also illegal to have a headset on headphones in whatever when you're riding a bike.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I don't ever do that. But then when it's colder, I'll like I'm going to the gym a little more often now, so I'm starting to listen to podcasts again. My wife's smirking at me, but I've been more times to the gym already in the last month than I went all of last winter, so it's a start.
So is that twice?
No, 3 times? No,
Okay,
maybe
all right.
4 or 5. I don't know, but it's Yeah, it's more deadline dictated. If we have like a project launch, everything kind of goes to hell. But
Yeah, that's our life, right?
Yep. Deadline-driven existence. But so after podcasts, I mean, it seems like we should be talking about like the in-person stuff, because there's a lot of that in the Drupal world.
Yeah, I'd say probably the number one way that I find out new trends or discuss new techniques and new solutions is twofold. One is with meetups and camps. You kind of get much bigger picture stuff at camps, but meetups you get a lot more granular. Like, here's a really interesting way to solve testing, or here's a really interesting way to solve for example, Stephen yesterday spoke about how to add drush commands to your module, so that you can run the functions from the command line. And if it's something that you've been struggling with, it's a really good way to just keep up on that. Whereas if you're trying to figure out how to do that yourself, you might end up Googling around, having to look at 5 or 6 different pages, or not even know it's possible. And just sitting down in a meetup, 10-minute discussion, somebody can say, here's a really quick way to make your life easier.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find is not the details of it sometimes, but it's like someone brings up a topic, just like the drush one. You know what? It never crossed my mind that I could even do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's a great way to walk away with like 3 things that you go, you know what? I'm going to look into this a little more. Yeah. So that's what that format that we did last night offers, that opportunity at a meetup.
Yeah.
Which is what's happened in the last couple of Boston ones I've been to. I've left there with 4 or 5 notes of, hey, here's a few things I need to look into.
Yeah, and I find that you get an idea of what people specialize in. The regulars that go to those meetups, what they specialize in, and then you know them. So if you have a question about something related to that, you can just send off an email really quick and say, oh, hey, I have a project that's coming up that has something to do with that. How would you approach it? Or is it a good fit for that? And we had an example of that yesterday at the Providence meetup. Somebody was discussing using the parallax paradigm with Drupal, and it turned into a huge discussion about whether or not Drupal is the right fit for it, or what other needs the company has, or whether parallax is a good fit at all, for the message of the company. And it's if you don't have that face-to-face interaction, sometimes it's very difficult to kind of have those discussions with feedback from a bunch of different people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's just, if you've never thought of it and you ask why something, like why use or not use Drupal, why use parallax versus some other design technique, it doesn't prompt you to think, one, whether or not it's the right answer, but 2, like you immediately, Nick, pulled up a couple different projects that he found on Drupal.org that could assist in that technique if it did end up being the right thing. So, I mean, that was actually one of the things I had put down on our list of ways to learn was just when you've got a problem, you hit Google and all of a sudden you find some modules that do stuff that you just didn't even know existed before.
Yeah, and that's actually a really good point, because many times modules aren't named after what they do. I mean, sometimes like they're dead easy. Like, you're looking to integrate MailChimp with Drupal. Well, the module's called MailChimp. It's very easy. But if you're not from the Drupal sphere, even modules like CTools or Views, like Views doesn't tell you what it does.
Right.
So if you're looking for a way to display content, you're probably going to end up installing Display Suite and then being really, really confused why you can't curate your content with that. And then, CTools, I'm convinced that if it wasn't required by a bunch of different stuff, it never would be installed. Because
right,
nobody's, well, I mean, that's the nature of what it is to it,
right.
yes, but a good, many times you go to a Drupal meetup and you say, I have this particular issue, I tried solving it this way, and somebody would say, hey, there's a module for that, and it's called Rainbow Skittles or something. And it's like, oh, okay. And you find out that it has 50,000 installs and it's really well supported and does exactly what you needed. You just had no idea what to look for.
Yeah. A lot of times I'll end up just querying on the basic terms that I know are sort of related, and just sticking Drupal in there, and just sometimes that'll turn up a blog post or an issue or something that'll be related to that challenge, and that'll be kind of the starting point to finding a new project to play with.
I remember that podcast, and I apologize.
Modules Unraveled, yeah.
I apologize to Brian Lewis, just because I listened to this thing. I listened to many of the episodes, and they're really fantastic. And I have no idea how I could not remember that name. So, Modules Unraveled is one to check out.
Cool.
He does in-depth discussions with developers in most of the shows. So. If you're using, I don't know, some module, let's say Display Suite, he may have a Display Suite developers on the call, and they get into some stuff about the module, and it's usually some in-depth discussion from a technical perspective. So it's not a lightweight website podcast. It's really good content, very focused each week, unlike us. So yeah, no, but it's a great show. So.
Excuse me.
Took me a few minutes to find that, but I didn't want to miss it. And there's probably other ones out there too, other podcasts that we haven't touched on. So we're talking about meeting in person, camps, conferences.
Yeah, DrupalCons, obviously.
Yeah, clearly places that you can go to meet people face to face. We did mention Meetups too.
We did, but there's also one that sort of sits in the middle. I mean, Exploring Drupal 8 that you started up is sort of a podcast, sort of an online meetup, because you are recording those, right?
Yeah. Yes. So if you go to exploringdrupal8.com, it basically takes you to a page in the Talking Drupal site, and it's a weekly discussion. I like to think of it more like a book club. Don't know why, because that metaphor I think is meaningful to me in some way. So, but it is hey, spend a little bit of time before the meeting to look at the topic and then talk about it. It's not a training. It's not anyone sort of running it other than organizing it, but it's some people gathering together, and it's only been around. I think we're 4 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
We just had the fourth call yesterday, and we've had anywhere from probably 6 to 10 people on the phone call, and we do record it on a video. It's not audio, but there's a video recording, so you can go back and watch them later.
And it's incredibly helpful, and probably the reason why it's good to follow the book club metaphor. It's incredibly helpful just for the accountability piece. If the purpose of this particular meeting is to learn Drupal 8 and get up to speed before it becomes mainstream, and it's an important task, and I'm sure it's something that's on a lot of developers and a lot of designers' mind. But if you don't have like that weekly commitment to it, then it's easy to say, "Oh, it's in beta 3. I'll do it next week. I'll do it in beta 4. I'll do it in beta 5." But this way, people, you have to have something to talk about in the meeting, and it's been incredibly helpful just learning like. You go through and you're learning about, for example, CMI, and you try something the way that the examples talk about it, you're like, wow, this is really cool, it works great, and then somebody else pipes up and says, oh yeah, but I tried doing this with it and it didn't quite work. So then you start exploring that and seeing if there's a different way around it, and then if not, then you write up an issue and a bug to help move the project along. But it's incredibly helpful. But I think it's it's not just about learning, it's also about finding something to bring to the table, and you have a group of people that that are in some sense depending on that and expecting that, so you have that extra motivation. So
yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it.
I haven't looked at the stats, so I don't know how many people are going back later and watching the video. I haven't looked at those stats yet, but it'll be interesting over the next, maybe in a couple of months, to go back and look and see if anyone else is benefiting from that hour that that core group of people are spending together. The email list has grown to about 16 people who've asked to be kept in touch about it.
Cool.
So, not crazy numbers, but it's growing every week. So it's a great place. It's a great place to learn about and talk about Drupal 8, but it's also a great idea for anyone who wants to do something similar. It doesn't really take much to just send out an email and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. Can anyone join in? And you'll be surprised how many people will step up and participate. And we did make this one at 11 o'clock in the morning, which is not super convenient for me because it's in the middle of my business day. I would prefer to tag this, start the day with this or end it with it.
Yeah.
But it was a time that we picked to accommodate the West Coast of the United States and people in Europe.
Yeah.
And we have both time zones attending this meeting regularly. So.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to have 8 to 9 time zones represented on that.
Yeah.
On that call.
So another thing that we haven't mentioned yet is social media is really a great place to stay up in current. And
that was how I first heard about weather.com.
Oh, is it? Okay. Was it from my Twitter post?
I don't remember, but it wasn't just one. I mean, it was definitely, a lot of people were talking about it, which is great.
Right. And it's also the way I just remembered the podcast Modules Unravel because I follow Brian Lewis on Twitter. So I just went to my Twitter follower list, and there he was sitting there. So it's a great place to. There's a lot of people that I follow in the Drupal world that just kind of post out stuff regularly about just things that are going on, and it's a great way to learn things. Another one is Google+. The Drupal community on Google+ is really active, and there's a lot of information in there. So I'd encourage you both to check those two things out.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Twitter. It's again the always on the go lifestyle there. You can scroll through a couple of tweets, favorite ones that you want to go back to later, and kind of fits in with the whole podcasting thing. You can always look at your tweets while you're standing in line at the supermarket or something like that. So
yeah, I use that favoriting technique too, just to so when I'm scrolling through and see something I want to come back to, use that as kind of a bookmark to be able to go back and read stuff later on.
Okay, so you both just said something that I didn't know was available to me. I favorite things, but I thought it was a way to sort of let someone know, hey, thanks for the tweet, or I appreciate this tweet, but it's also a way to bookmark stuff? How do I see those?
You can go and look at the things that you favorited.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, so when you look at your own profile, you can see what you've posted, but you can...
Oh, there it is, favorites.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of an unintended consequence, but it works really nicely that way.
So I guess the important question is, if you go back and read it and decide you don't like it, do you unfavorite it?
I do not.
So, I think this really brings up a really interesting question is, so I go through these Google alerts all the time, and all these things, I kind of look through that stuff every day, but what are the things if I really want to get back, because I can't read all those articles, right?
Right.
I look at the titles, I'll read the ones that catch my attention, and then some of them, they'll catch my attention, but I don't have time to read them. So what I do for that, and which is like this favorite process here, is I forward them to my to-do list. And this is not going to be a to-do list conversation today, but I forward them to my to-do list, and they show up with a link in my to-do list, and then when I go through my to-do list at some time during the week, I'll move them over to read at some point. And then on nights or weekends, or when I'm looking for something to read, I go through that list and kind of clean things out. So there's a whole process there, but I mean, the point that I think John was trying to make earlier is he doesn't have a lot of time to look at a lot of stuff. But
Yeah.
I think you probably have time every day to look through the titles of things and maybe favorite or bookmark the things you'd like to get back to or could be useful for you in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, if I send you on Twitter, that's how I bookmark it, essentially.
I actually have a folder in my favorites list, and I'm using a syncing service, so all my favorites kind of sync from desktop to laptop to some mobile phone. But basically, the folder is just saved for later, and all that is anything that's interesting, video, blog, whatever. that I want to read later on or when I have downtime. So there are a bunch of different ways you can kind of save this stuff for later date.
Yeah, I mean, on like the more shorter term thing, I'll go with Nick's tried and true. Add another tab, leave it open in the browser so I can. But
there are 800 tabs open right now. He just broke
I
down
don't
to
get past like a dozen or so because it just kills my computer.
yeah.
Hey Nick, you gotta do a screenshot of your tabs right now, and just so we can put them in the show notes for later.
I can do that.
Because we've mentioned this, I think, a number of times about your tabs.
So let me just say right now, I have 3 Chrome windows open, and each of them has at least 3 tabs. And one of them has about
sounds pretty lightweight by your
no.
standards.
One of them has about 25 tabs. One has 3, and one has 6.
Oh, that's low. So you're on the low end today.
Yeah, I started cleaning them out.
Okay.
But I did that yesterday. But and it works for me. I mean, I don't know. Chrome has recently started crashing,
Me too.
random pages all the time,
Yep.
Which is incredibly annoying. But I don't think it has anything to do with how many pages I have open.
You'd
So
be
I'll take a
surprised.
screenshot though.
Yeah, it uses a chunk of memory with every tab, so it's. I mean, that's part of potentially the issue.
So something I actually just thought about and that I want to add to I added to the show notes, but something that came up in my brain while talking about this topic is, other people around you are a great source of staying current, and I don't know, Jason and Nick work at smaller companies. I don't know if Parallax does anything like this, but is there a way internally that you guys share information, like some sort of chat room or document where you post cool links or something like that?
Yeah, I have a whiteboard behind me, and when I think I see something cool, I just write down the cool link, and then I go to it and visit it and say, oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
So John, yeah.
So you send messages to yourself. Well, so
He sends them on a whiteboard to himself.
Well, that's because he couldn't figure out how to sign into the chat client, 2 different accounts at the same time.
So
Messaging back and forth. You can do 3 people, 1 on each screen, Nick.
Oh yeah, I could do that.
John, so your question to me is do we do this internally in my company? I would love us to. And I've tried to, but we don't force people to use tools necessarily unless it's like an official company tool. I've tried to get people to use Slack, which I absolutely love.
Sure.
Which is a great way to sort of create a channel in Slack and just say, here's some interesting things that you should work. You know what? And you've sparked me to make people do this again.
So here, let me give you some more food for thought here. Here's what we do at Oomph. We actually use Instapaper. So most of us, and again, it's totally voluntary, but most of us have a Instapaper bookmarklet in our browser. And when we see something cool, we'll use that bookmarklet to mark that link or blog post or whatever it might be. And what that then does is create a list within Instapaper of Oomph posts or Oomph, stuff people at Oomph shared. And then I don't know if it's every day or every other day, that will actually go out in an email through, I think, a free MailChimp account as a newsletter. So everybody gets in their mailbox what we call the reading list, which is basically a list of links that everybody else at the company has kind of put together. So that's another great way to kind of stay current and to kind of share information with one another. And sometimes I get my best stuff out of there just because it's you're only one person. You can only cover so much space, and we have a lot of different things going on with the WordPress side of the business, the front end side of the business, the back end side of the business. And it's good to see what those those groups of people are interested in, and someday it may help me do my job easier or better.
I love that idea. Have you guys seen? I don't know what the name of it is, so this is really gonna be a bad question. But
This thing. Have you seen this thing that does
yeah,
that
have you
stuff?
seen this thing?
Maybe your Twitter feed can help you out.
Every once in a while, I get a notification from someone that a blog post that either we wrote in my company or something that I tweeted, or like a episode of Talking Drupal has shown up on someone's
Paperly?
curation page. And if there's some sort of tool that people are using that they accumulate
Are you talking
content
about
and it creates sort of like a newsletter, just like you're talking about, John.
sort of like Paperly?
Hmm.
Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know if it's Paperly. I'm not sure what it is.
Yeah, I see that stuff all the time when things that I've like tweeted get picked up in so and so's Paperly Daily or whatever.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay, and then
Yeah.
someone is kind of publishing their own curated information from the internet.
Yeah, so I mean, I know people that do them on UX and innovation and a few different topics.
I hear a tone in your voice that it's not.
Oh no, it's not. It's not meant to be a tone at all. I mean,
Okay.
I always go and look. I've never been inspired to make one or really follow them.
I'm sorry, can I pause here for just a second to go back to something we talked about 5 minutes ago?
No.
Nick just posted a picture of his tabs in the chat room. How do you get anything done with that many tabs open?
Well, you don't know what any of them are.
Yeah, I do. I know what all of them are.
The first one is Gmail. The second one appears to be some sort of paper thing.
Pandora.
Pandora, there you go. Calendar. I can identify pretty much all of those, but what? How does that work?
Listen, I want to tell you something. If you've done any screen sharing with Nick in the past, this is a very low volume of tabs.
I get them to the point where the icons don't even show up.
Yeah,
anymore.
that's
They're
what I
just
mean.
little mountain peaks.
I've seen his tab bar where there's no icons whatsoever on his screen.
The worst it's ever been is when I cleaned it up, I found out that I had 10 copies of the same page on there because I just kept opening it.
Uh-huh.
But
what's
So
really-
it's working perfectly well for you then.
But what's
Yeah.
really impressive is Nick might have like 50 things in those tabs, and he knows exactly which one to click to open something.
Yeah.
Like how do you decipher the 6 Drupal icons you have open right now? Or
Well,
the
they're
two
all
Reddit
one site. So I'm building the site and testing some things, so they're all related pages on the same site that I need to review as I update it. And then if I'm working on more than one, if I end up being pulled away, then I put something else in between them, and then I have another group of tabs for the next site.
This could be a
So
prime
it's-
example of how not to stay
I don't know.
current
I'm
on
thinking
something.
it's a mind map of Nick's mind, like a mapping of his mind in some.
It would
weird
scare
way.
me, I think.
I feel like what was it, John Mayer? No, he was talking about your body, not your mind. Never mind. Forget it. Let's move on.
A Wonderland? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, it's
John's
what
failed pop musical references.
it's what I'm getting at, but it was a failure.
All right, so to get back on topic, John, I think you have a really interesting idea there about how to curate content within a company and people, because you guys have all shared interests on the same sort of things, and people posting these articles that would relate to you because you're all sort of working on the same stuff, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, it's also, I find that a lot of times people within a company or an organization can get really almost tunnel vision, that they're working on their stuff and they're not paying attention to what's going on around them.
Sure.
And that can really be a kind of a downfall for this.
They call that
whole-
productivity, by the way.
Well, it could be a downfall for staying current and knowing what's going on in the not only the greater tech world, but also in your space. So I think it's a great way to kind of do a little bit of indirect team building and to get to know what other people are kind of doing.
Yeah, I mean the most important thing if you want to stay current is you need to interact with other people in some fashion. It's impossible to keep track of and keep up to date on even one minuscule piece of what you're doing, never mind everything. Like CSS changes extremely quickly, JavaScript does, even HTML or Drupal or the technologies that you're working with change so rapidly and are so expansive. Nobody can keep up with everything. So having people that specialize or are very interested in a particular topic around you that can say, hey, this piece is particularly important, you need to pay attention to this, is incredibly helpful. And on this call, each of us has different specialties and different things that we really focus on, and when something comes up in that space, we can turn to our colleagues and ask a question, and that's a really important tip for keeping up to date.
And I think one other thing that's worth mentioning before we transition over to talking about maybe some wider industry things is something that actually would apply to either, and that is writing. Whenever you do figure something out, writing it up as a blog post, writing an article for a website or a publication really forces you to not just sort of work it out and get the project done, but really understand everything that went into it, document it, make it reproducible, and then everybody else benefits. So even if you don't get to the point of writing a patch, making a module, whatever it is, that recipe is there for somebody else to find. And I can't tell you how many times I've gotten comments on blog posts that I've put out there about setting up something on Media Temple that ended up helping somebody else out, and that's a great feeling to know that whatever you worked out has now just saved somebody else just hours of time.
It's interesting you say that, Jason, because more recently I've been trying to comment and to submit patches to Drupal.org, and a lot of times it doesn't take, again, a lot of time. It's not something that's going to take you hours like a full-length blog post can, but just commenting on oh, hey, I downloaded your patch, I applied it, and it worked. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Or even just subscribing to a ticket can be a great way of staying current. And a great example of this that actually just happened this past, we'll say in the last week, is for those of you using admin menu. There's actually a bug in admin menu that prevents it from working with the latest version of Firefox. And I actually found the issue in the issue queue and just subscribed to it. Didn't write on it. Didn't say anything. Just subscribed to it. And it's been really interesting to see how the process has gone to kind of get a patch up and to people who have found other fixes that don't require patches and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that could be another method for staying current. Granted, once you get to the point where you're on like a bunch of really hot button topics, your inbox could become mayhem. But that's
what unsubscribe is for.
Yeah, or you just email filtering at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even just today, we had a problem with video using the video filter on one of our sites, and all of a sudden it was working in Safari and it wasn't working anywhere else, and we were seeing the filter doing its thing, but it took me a while to figure it out that it actually was an SSL non-SSL issue. And it turns out that because the whole site was forced into SSL, the video filter module, the way it was working, was always writing out the embed that you were supplying using HTTP and not whatever protocol you supplied.
Yeah,
so
you're viewing unsecured content on a secured site.
Right, so you'd have a blank space and the video would never load. So I ended up just going in and stripping out the protocol entirely, because if you write out the link just with 2 leading slashes and then the URL, it will use whatever protocol the page is using.
Right.
Interesting.
So I need to figure out the right place to put that and then turn it into a patch, but just that process of figuring out what that one little thing is and going back and posting it, even if you don't have time to make the solution, just post a comment and say this is an issue, and then all of a sudden that's findable and you can get people going in the right direction.
Yeah,
the easiest way to share.
Yeah, and many times module maintainers are thankful for that. So I've been having an issue recently with the references dialog module, and some of the stuff is a bit over my head, and I figured out if I tweaked a couple things, I got it working again. So I left instead of creating a patch because I knew there were a couple things that weren't done correctly. I just, I created a patch but didn't submit it. I just put that in the comment and said, here's where I changed and here's the reasoning why I did, but I don't think all of it is correct. And then, a day or two later, the module maintainer commented and said, well, this is wrong and this is why. And then, went through everything and said, here's a couple other places you could look. So it definitely moved the motivation forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've even at times ended up making a patch to solve an issue with a module the way I needed it solved, and posted it there with the caveat, like in the comment, look, I know this probably isn't right for the module, but it really solved the problem for me, and I wanted to make sure this solution was available for other people if that fit their use case. And it really helps you understand how modules are put together and how how to describe it and how to fix it, and it just helps your own understanding as well.
All right, so let's move on to talking about non-Drupal stuff. So, as web developers, we're attuned to what's going on in the industry too. I mean, what's happening with CSS, HTML changes and standards, and what are the trends in terms of technology? Lots of things going on with headless Drupal, although that is related to Drupal, but a lot of work being done in that world. So I think all the same things that we've already talked about in terms of staying current apply to non-Drupal things. So what recommendations do we have for people to keep up to date in this world as well?
So I do a lot of podcasts, and admittedly, a lot of the podcasts that I do are less about Drupal and more about just tech and web development.
Yeah, me too.
And honestly, there are two networks out there that are putting out a ton of really good content for different types of tech issues. I know the Twit network puts out This Week in Tech, which is just general tech talk show. This Week in Google, a Mac show, a photography show. So there are a lot of different stuff coming out of that network. Also, Dan Benjamin's network, 5x5. Puts out some quality shows like the Web Ahead and the Big Web Show with none other than Jeffrey Zeldman. So there are a ton of other sources for tech news out there. Those are some of the ones that I'm kind of listening to.
I've been a big fan of a lot of the 5x5 shows over the years. So I mean, I listen to the Web Ahead and the Big Web Show pretty regularly, and the Dirt Show from Fresh Tilled Soil is really good too. And what I like about that one is usually a little shorter. A lot of these other shows are an hour plus, and the Dirt Show is usually a half hour, and so it fits in a narrower window, which is kind of nice.
Nick, do you do any podcast listening? You don't really chime up on podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, I listen to a couple of podcasts, but they're more hobby-related rather than tech-related. Business-related podcasts, I used to listen to Insert Content Here, but there hasn't been a release in quite a while. I'm thinking about taking a look at This Week in Tech and maybe a couple of the others here, though. But I don't listen to too many podcasts, except for...
There's actually one that I forgot to add to the list. I'm going to put it in there now. Ethan Marcotte and Karen McGrain have started one on responsive design that is out of this world, and it's really in-depth on very large-scale projects.
Yeah, I'll have to
what is that
follow
called?
that.
Jason, do you know?
I think it's just called... hang on a second. Let me find
Responsive
it.
Design Podcast?
Something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, that's again. It comes out. It's been coming out every week, and it's got tremendously good stuff in there. I know I save links to those. Responsive web design. That is it. That is what it's called.
Makes sense.
But they have that just at I think it's just at responsivewebdesign.com.
So the general point is, if there's a topic that you're interested in, don't forget to look for podcasts as a source for content. And I'm not sure everyone does that all the time, but go to iTunes or just do a Google search. iTunes is really a great place to find the audio versions of these. Put in your topic and you'll find reviews. You'll find how frequently the podcast is updated. It's very easy to find a podcast that way, and that's what I'd recommend people to do. Don't forget to go down that route.
I also recommend give it a couple of shows. Don't listen to one show and kind of throw it out the window. Give it 2 or 3, maybe even 4 shows before you kind of make a decision about a podcast. Because we were talking about this before the show. Not all podcasts are going to be or are going to be entertaining to you or are going to be useful to you. So keep that in mind as well.
So attending, the face-to-face side of keeping current is also important. Attending conferences, which I try to do at least one a year, maybe 2. So there are a number of design and development conferences, and they could be sort of national conferences. They could also be regionally based. I know up here in New England there was a conference, the Nerd Conference. Is that what it's called? Nerd
Summit.
Nerd Summit.
Nerd Summit.
Yeah. Okay, Nerd Summit, which was really about open source development, but it was 3 days of development issues that covered all kinds of open source topics. A great place to go and learn, and to meet other people in your space. It wasn't really Drupal specific, but a great source. There's these national conferences. Event Apart is a big one.
Yep. Future of Web Design, Future of Web Apps, Future of Mobile, Future Insights. Those all done by the Future Insights company. Those shows are throughout the year around the country, and are great, multi-day, broad coverage kind of conferences. And then there are some other really interesting one-day conferences too. And I think that what I can't really stress enough for a lot of people is that the money, especially for people that work for themselves, it's hard to say I'm going to spend $1,000 and go to this thing. And it's just you get so much out of going to even just one of these events a year that I think it's just really important for your own development, and to sort of solidify a lot of connections that you can make in the community, because all the people that are going there are like you, and then there's the speakers, and they're always kind of hanging out, going to the sessions too, and you get chances to meet them and make connections there too. You just never know what's gonna come from it.
Yeah, Jason, I agree with that. I also think that a lot of people, especially people that are working for themselves or in smaller companies, don't jump on the first conference you see. Definitely look at how far your money's going to take you.
Yeah.
Because, Event Apart, great conference. Would love to go every year, but it's a little bit pricey. Now, granted, that's very, very much worth the price, but if you're putting that up against something that's more topical, like DrupalCon or CSS DevConf or something like that, maybe you could go to 2 conferences as opposed to 1 Event Apart. So something that I've tried to do is every other year going to one of the bigger, more expensive conferences and trying to kind of stagger what I go to every year. Can definitely help you get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, and there's, if you look at, Lanyard is a great website to look up conferences, and looking for ones that, like, following a track of web design, front end development, responsive design, something like that. Looking for events, you'll find ones that are a little smaller, maybe, especially if it's coming out of your own pocket. Finding good one-day events that are still going to be fantastic. They'll still have great speakers. I mean, like Web Design Day out in Pittsburgh, one-day event, really inexpensive, always has really top-notch people there. because and Artifact is really similar too in Austin and Providence every year, and that's another one that if you hop on one of the early bird tickets for maybe $300, you can get 2 days of amazing speakers, and that so your investment there goes a really long way.
It's a good point about the early bird tickets. Most conferences offer these.
Yep.
And they're sometimes 50% off of what the regular ticket price is.
Yeah, and on top of that, a lot of times they'll have codes that some of the speakers can tweet out, and so if you pay attention there as well, sometimes you can find even another $100 off. So it's really a lot of conference organizers have this on their mind, and it's certainly on our mind when we've organized events. How to keep the cost accessible for students, for freelancers, while still, being able to run a profitable event, and most of them will try and do something like that. Sometimes even having, special rates for freelancers sometimes, or special rates for students that you can sort of apply for.
And there's sometimes nothing more liberating than spending 2 days. Like, turn off all your other work for 2 days, right? And spending 2 days with like-minded people, looking ahead, not behind, is really you leave those conferences really feeling energized most times, and just ready to move in new directions. It's really an amazing thing, and as expensive as some of them could be at times, I think you'll often leave saying, "Oh my God, that was way worth the money that I spent on it, or someone else spent on it."
Yeah, and sometimes it's not just about what you're pulling away; it's also about the connections that you make there.
Yeah, I mean the one time that I've gone to an event apart, John and I ended up sitting down at a table with Jeremy Keith learning about HTML5. I mean, it was really kind of amazing, and it's the accessibility of the people who are speaking there is fantastic, and I've seen that. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to speak at a lot of conferences, but I've been to many, and that's been across the board. I've never been to a conference where I didn't end up meeting a ton of new people and real experts. So you're just going to learn an incredible amount of stuff.
So the last piece we have here is publications, which sounds like an oxymoron a little bit when you say the word stay current and publications. So and I do think in our industry it's a particular issue, in that when we wrote publications here, it means a book. So how obsolete is a book as soon as you get it? I mean, in our industry, it's pretty quick.
I don't know, Jason. How obsolete is a book?
It's a great topic. Yeah.
Well, I think that has changed in the last couple of years, because I think that used to be very true. By the time you got that 300-page book, half of what was in it was out of date. But that got turned on its head a little bit when Jeffrey Zeldin and crew launched A Book Apart with these 100-page books. And so all of a sudden it was something that was short enough that it could be published quickly enough that it would still be really current and really useful. And thankfully, luckily for me, O'Reilly has kind of followed suit in making it okay to publish in their line of books. You can do big books if you want, or you can do something that's really short. Mine ended up being around 100 pages or so, and while I did have to go and edit a lot of stuff last summer, I finished doing my edits in August, and I had a physical book to hand out at Artifact at the end of September. That was pretty amazing. I mean, the speed with which that turned around, and while I may have to go and update some of the sample source code here and there, at least I know pretty much everything that's in that book, at least for 2 months now, has remained valid. So I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah, I mean it really depends too. I mean some kinds of books are obsolete much quicker than other kinds. Like for example, some pieces of Ethan Marcotte's responsive web design book are obsolete because we've learned so much about the technology, but the general premise of the book
True.
Likely won't go obsolete for a very, very long time. And the more granular, like here, this is how you learn CSS 2.2.1 or whatever. That'll go obsolete a lot quicker than here's some good design principles when using CSS. The former probably went obsolete within 6 months, and the latter would have been.
Yeah, so Nick, I'm not challenging the value of books. I'm just asking the question related to our topic today, which is staying current. And I'm not sure that publications. I think books are fantastic. I buy them. I use them. They're great for principles and strategy. And I'm not sure they're the place you should go to stay current. Is my point.
I don't know. I don't know, Steve, because I think that the thing about books is they're going to be more in depth. So if you want to really get into the nuts and bolts of performance responsive design, Scott Gell's book is going to be a fantastic place to start, and it's going to be valid, for a little while. Maybe it's a year, but I think you've gotten your $20 out of it at that point.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm asking the question in terms of the topic for today, which isn't where are the great resources to learn how to do things. The topic is where do you stay current, and unless there's maybe a digital and maybe Smashing Magazine might be one, because there's that's sort of a digital magazine as well as a printed one. That maybe is a publication that's about staying current.
Well, .NET Magazine would be another one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's probably a few.
Yeah, but I would say, like, in that, I think that I would still put a book apart books in staying current, because the stuff that's and I think that is by and large the exception in the book world.
Right.
And 5 Simple Steps was kind of the same idea.
Yeah, Book Apart is a great example. They're giving you published books that are on current industry trends, right, and direction for the industry. And it doesn't mean that they're not obsolete in a month, but it is general stuff. Yeah, I think they're a good example. All right, so why don't we move to the module of the week? We have ImageAPI Optimize.
So this was one that I found. I found it by needing to optimize images on a website that I'm currently working on. I showed it to you guys last night at the meetup. But more importantly, I was trying to find a way to tie into the Smush It service from Yahoo. And so I started Googling that and found it, and then it turns out that it was actually, I already had a link to it in my mailbox from as a Module Monday entry from Lullabot. So I ended up reading about it on Lullabot's website and then integrating it in the site. And it's this fantastic way to get better compression out of any images uploaded through the Drupal admin UI. So any user-supplied images, so not the stuff in your theme, but anything that is served by Drupal that goes through image styles, you can run through this service just by installing the module. And once you've set up your image styles, you go to the image toolkit page in your in the admin for your site, and I'm just trying to pull this up here.
Jason, what do you mean by better?
Okay, so there's 2 ways to make files smaller when you're talking about a JPEG, generally. So talking about photographic images. It could be a JPEG or a PNG. There's 2 ways that you can make it smaller. You can reduce the quality of the image by compressing it further, or you can optimize the structure of the file itself. And now that's not something that you could normally do on your own. The best analogy I can give you in the normal world that I was used to was when you go to, you're in Photoshop, you're making an image, and you just go and save as a JPEG, and it says, okay, here, what level of quality, 1 through 12, or 0 through 100, whatever the scale is it gives you now. And and you save it as a JPEG, and it will be, let's say, uncompressed, it was 3 megabytes, and it will save it out as a JPEG that's 300K. But if you go under Save for Web and save it as a JPEG, even if you choose the same level of quality, it's going to be a smaller file.
Right.
And because Photoshop is doing some things there to optimize it for delivery on the web, a little bit more than just saving it in the JPEG format. Now, there are other things inside the JPEG file that could be optimized better without sacrificing the quality, and that's what the Smush It service does. And there are a bunch of other tools that do this by actually rearranging the byte order within the file itself. You can create a smaller file, some cases significantly smaller. I mean, I was looking at images that were, you know, being displayed on screen at about 150 pixels across that had not been handled well and were 90K, and ran it through this service without resaving it, without changing the level of visible quality, and it reduced it to about 4K.
Jason, is this installing library files on your server to do
Nope.
the optimization, or is it calling out to a third party?
It's going out to a third-party service. You can install tools. So the admin for this module, it shows up on the Image Toolkit page. So you install this module, ImageAPI_Optimize, and then you choose the image processing toolkit. So instead of GD2, which is what most people are using by default, or ImageMagick, you select ImageAPI Optimize, and then the base toolkit is where you make the choice between GD2 and ImageMagick. So whatever you were doing before, that just becomes a secondary choice. So you choose ImageAPI Optimize, and then whatever your base toolkit is on this one site I'm looking at right now, it's the ImageMagick, and then you choose the Optimize service, and there's where you can say either internal tools and configure what it is, or use Yahoo Smush It. And so this turns it into a web service call. It sends the file off to Yahoo. It comes back optimized.
Which requires you have an account set up?
It does not.
Okay.
And you don't have to do anything at all. This is just turn this module on, configure this page. And the only other thing that you've got to do is...
And it's only an issue the first time, right? The first time this image is generated, it's calling the outside service, and then the image is on your site.
Actually, you can insert this module at any time because it happens at the step where the derived image is created, which is actually, in my mind, better because it means you can start using this at any time, even if you already have tons of images on your site.
So it will look for the new smudge image. If it's not there, it will generate it.
Yep. Okay. And so you could install this and then just go and I use Drush to flush all derived images, and so that way I know anytime somebody hits the site after that, it will create the resized image and then pipe it through Smush It and then serve it and save that file.
What if Smush It isn't available? Does it just use the default?
Callback, right?
Yeah, it just won't do it. So I mean, if it doesn't get the callback, then it still has the original image. Okay. It just knows that it, and so I haven't seen it come up against a problem yet. So, okay. But I haven't used it extensively. But it's not getting rid of the original file until it gets the optimized one. But what the net result was, several 100K reduction in some of these large homepage hero image files.
Without
any visible loss to the client and without quality. The administrator.
Wow, yeah.
Right, and the administrators of the site didn't have to do anything. All I did was go in, turn on the module, flush the derived images, and that was it.
Wow, sounds like really interesting to look at. Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing. And so it's one of those things that you combine that with using a tool that pipes it through the same service with all the files in your theme, and you can achieve unbelievable savings in what you have going on the server. Because even if you're saving for web out of Photoshop, you can still compress it more without any visible loss. Sometimes it's not that much, but other times you'll be surprised all of a sudden it will reduce the file size by 50%. And so that
Wow.
that net reduction took the homepage load from 3.5 megs to 860K on this one site.
Huge difference.
Yeah,
Huge.
and that was
it's
there's
insane.
one-time configuration.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little things that we could do to increase the performance of our Drupal sites or any site you're working on, and that one all of a sudden was just this total eye-opener. So,
Yeah,
that's going to be in our...
It falls in the category of being a hero module, right?
It totally does. The one thing I want to not forget to mention is that if you create a new image style, you need to go back to the image toolkit page and just save it again. You don't have to change anything. Just resave the settings so that it gets the mapping to...
Right.
Is there a drush command for that?
I have no idea.
Well, we
Maybe.
learned last night how to add one if there isn't.
That's true. There you go.
All right, guys, let's call this a show. John has moved to his icon. I see his.
Oh, I got
is
John
gone.
back now.
Oh, okay. I don't see John back. I see a cow. Anyway, thanks, guys. Anything to add before we wrap up today's show? Jason.
You can find me at jpomentel on pretty much everything. We still have a few super early bird discount tickets to my full-day workshop in Boston on responsive typography. So you can learn about that at webcoffee.co and learn about type by buying my book. It's a great Christmas present.
Right, and it's current, and it's
a
a
very
way to stay
current. That's right. That's right.
John, how about you?
Jason will actually come to your house and update it for you as it updates as well, so it'll always be current.
Well,
You just need to provide your address, right?
actually, O'Reilly does let me go in and update the ebook version whenever I want, and they'll republish it. So that was actually kind of a neat little part of the program there.
So you can find me on all social networks at John Picozzi and always on at oomphinc.com.
And in his recliner on Wednesday afternoons.
And about the house on Wednesday afternoons. Also, check out our blog. We've been pushing out some great new blog posts, so check those out.
Oomph.com/blog? Is that?
That sounds pretty reasonable.
Okay, something like that.
It may be completely wrong, but it sounds reasonable.
Right. Nick?
I can be found online pretty much anywhere at NixVan, and next week calling from South America. So I'll be looking forward to the nice weather down there. Hopefully the snow stays off long enough for the plane to take off, but it can't snow for a week. So at some point, we'll get down there. And,
so if you are in Colombia and you want to hang out with Nick, you could tweet him at NixVan, and you could do a little Talking Drupal meetup down in Colombia.
Absolutely, and I'm actually looking for the Bogota meetup. So if somebody has any insight, please tweet me.
Hopefully in English.
Awesome.
Joanna can translate for me if
There you go.
it's in Spanish.
And for me, I'm Stephen Cross at Stephen Cross on Twitter. Please visit my company website, parallaxinfotech.com. And on Tuesday mornings at 11 a.m. Eastern, we're doing this Exploring Drupal 8 conversation, as we talked about today. Just you can go to that website, send me an email, and I'll add you to the invite list. And I think that's it, guys. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks. Bye.
Talk to you next week.
Thanks.
Take care.
See you next week.